you mind if we have the lights off? Is that okay? So I was theoretically supposed to talk about mobility because that's what you've been talking about, but I have this word access in there because that's a pretty important distinction. This is the graph that all people who do transportation planning have used for decades and decades to say, if you want more mobility, then this is the kind of roads you're starting to have to see, up to freeways. That's about mobility. Just gaining access is more about cul-de-sacs and local streets. And they always are going for mobility, not just being able to get to the store or not being able to get to your job or whatever it is you want to do, but how are you able to get in your car and drive a lot every day? And what that's about, and I can't not be political here, I won't express an opinion, I'll just tell you, this is how counties voted for the presidential election in 2016. And so you can see that all the urban places, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, and Dallas, are Democratic, and all the non-urban places, and particularly suburban places, are Republican. And so Republicans are in charge of the whole state. This is showing congressional districts, same thing, just finer. We have some congressional, 3 districts in the Houston region that have Democrats as the congressmen. This I show you because I thought you might be interested in how somebody tries to express something that doesn't match the map and so on, but it's sort of cool anyway. Same data. And the point is that this is what they call the Texas Triangle, and I put the little red dot so you can see all the urban places that are in it. And when you're sitting in Austin and you're controlling the Texas Transportation Commission, you want the purpose of that commission to be to open land for development outside of these red spaces, because those red spaces are going to be Democrats, so we don't care about them. And everything else is going to be Republicans, and we care a lot about them. So the major dynamic that drives everything that happens is that. Now, of course, there's also the case that developers like to give money to politicians on both sides, and the developers and big construction companies and engineers and so forth love to get involved in highway building. So they mean mobility. They don't mean getting access to the things you need or want. They mean get in your car and go do some stuff, driving around. And then, by the way, this Texas Triangle is an interesting place. 66% of the Texas population lives in these places. You know, the state's way out here. So 80% of the population growth has happened in these places, and 77% of the Texas economy is in these places. And they're all the urban places. So this is a map that HJC has online. They used to call it the blue map, but now it's called the ACE map, ACE. And it's an incredible map. It's not perfect, but it allows citizens who are willing to do a little work to really get to some good data and to some good maps. So what you'll see as I go along here is I think almost everything I have in these maps came from this map from HJC. And then I take screenshots and I put them in Photoshop and pile them up so that I can then go between things, because I don't actually know how to do ArcGIS. But it means it's possible. And we're working on making a map, maybe with HJC, that would be even more useful for citizens. In the meantime, and all that's showing is, I don't even know, those are probably the activity intensity places on the map. I shouldn't have shown you that as the first one. But anyway, this is the map, and you can go in and out. There are quite a few layers. So what we're talking about when we talk about transportation planning in our region is these 8 counties, Harris surrounded by 7 others. And that's what the Houston-Galveston Area Council does, getting federal and state money in here, and tax money, sales tax money and everything else. And they kind of apportion it. They all sit in a room together and decide how that's going to work. It's largely run by counties as opposed to the cities, because the way they vote is such that it's sort of like senators and members of Congress, you know, where the senator from Montana has exactly the same voting power as the senator from California or New York. So it's a little unbalanced and always wanting to build roads, but that's the area that is covered. This is showing you where clusters of jobs are. So I think I've got 10,000 jobs per square mile, and that's beginning to look like urban space. So that's where they are. And they aren't everywhere, obviously, and they are clustered, but Galveston and the Woodlands have pretty good chunks too. And one of the things you see, Houston has 7, arguably 8 places like this, each of which has more jobs than downtown Miami or Denver. They are big city downtowns in their own right, and we have 7 of them, not 1. So when people talk about living in an urban place and they mean downtown, oh, I'm sorry, downtown is just one of them. And whenever we think about mobility, we have to think about how do we get to all of those places, not just the one. So if you do park and ride from almost anywhere, you know it only goes to downtown, with a few buses that go, I think, to TMC, and maybe a couple that go to Uptown. Is that right, Janice? Yeah. Well, pretty much they don't go there. They go downtown. This is where the population is, you know. And when you look at this great big place here, you can see everything is kind of right in the middle. It's not out there all over the county as people like to try to make you think. This is something called activity density or activity intensity, where you add the number of jobs and the population in a space, and that's activity. So people are in that space, and these are little, later you'll see they're little hexagons. So that's how many people are there during the day, whether they live there or they work there, or well, that's it. We don't know about it when people go shopping or go to a restaurant, or we don't have those numbers. But so that's where people cluster around the region. Again, the Woodlands, nothing in Galveston at that. You see one dot up there. And then this is the Metro service area, this gray space out here. So everything outside of the Metro service area is a place where people voted not to have regional transit. So when people say, I don't understand why Metro doesn't run buses from Woodlands or Sugar Land or someplace, well, the answer is because you voted not to have transit for the reason somebody said a little while ago about the undesirables, or whatever reason you have for not wanting to have transit. So we're in a really horrible moment right now where these people are saying, but I want transit. And the people who live inside this saying, yeah, but we paid for it, and you don't. Well, I don't care, I want it. So we're having a pretty big fight now about how we're going to do regional transit for the whole region, knowing that really the only places you could serve transit in the whole place are these little red spots. I mean, anything, you can do buses pretty much everywhere, but this is for like high capacity light rail or bus rapid transit or something like that. You need around 10 or 20,000 people per square mile to support that, and those are the only places where that exists. So coming in a little closer, you can really start to see the pattern. That's all the activity in places, activity intensity that's over 20,000 people per square mile. And if you were to look at a place like Paris, for instance, activity intensity would be something like 120,000 people per square mile, that kind of stuff. Washington, D.C. is probably 40. So we have some places that are actually urban in scale, but they're where they are. And then this is showing the lighter red is 10,000, coming down 10,000. So you could say, okay, let's make sure we're covering everybody here, because with 10,000 you could supply very good bus service. So we can provide very good bus service to all those places if you're going to be data driven. But so far we haven't been data driven. We've been politics driven. Metro did their first thing with using data, which was connecting downtown to the medical center. Brightest thing anybody's ever done in transit in America in a long time. And as a result, that line has more riders per square mile, per mile in length than any other modern light rail line in the country, by kind of a lot. So if you say Dallas has 90 miles of rail and we have about 30, but our ridership is approaching theirs, so we spent 10% as much money as they did to achieve almost what they did. And that will get better as we go along. So connecting these centers together is the way to do it. And one of the champions of that is Jarrett Walker, as Janice said, the guy who did the redo of the bus system, is a big time proponent of this kind of stuff. So thinking that you need to connect the centers together, and that's how you get people to be able to go, particularly when people live near those centers. And the people do live approximately where most of the jobs are. So this is coming in even closer, because this is what I call the urban core. So again, it's downtown, Medical Center, Greenway, uptown, West Chase, a couple of others. There is one more out at Greens Point, which is inside the circle, but it just makes it so the scale of the map is hard to work with. I just want to show why you might say the very next thing we do would be in these groups right here. So this is where we have light rail right now. So you see it's going through two of these giant dense centers. This is where we're going to put the Uptown Bus Rapid Transit of Post Oak. And Bus Rapid Transit is a service I'll talk about a little later, but it's a service that acts just like light rail, but it's got rubber tires instead of rail. So it's a big difference in terms of the construction of the street, and a big difference in terms of the cost of the vehicle, although over a long period of time, the rail cars last longer and cost less over a long period of time. But you can't afford them in the first place, so it's like I know a Mercedes would be a better car for me, but you know. So I think the very next thing we can do, and there's a lot of talk about this, you know, we have problems with John Culberson and this idea that he doesn't want to have light rail on Richmond. And does a little piece of Richmond where he actually can say that. And he has written, all the transit bills, the federal transit bills go blah, 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 blah. Specifically, though, you can't have light rail on Richmond and Houston. All the cities and all the streets in the country, there's only one street that's named where we're not allowed, the federal government's not allowed to spend money on it for light rail. And he just renewed that about a month ago, so it's back in the bill again. So what people are talking about then is not doing light rail, do bus rapid transit. He hasn't said no to that, and he didn't try to stop the Post Oak bus rapid transit. And if you wanted to be really aggressive in the face of what he's saying, you might just build from Wheeler at Richmond over to Shepherd, which is in Ted Poe's area. Wouldn't cost very much, would get the service started, and every time you do a little thing like that, the next people really want it, so then, you know, and so you might go then through Greenway Plaza. Now you've added another big job center to this system over here into Greenway Plaza. But look how close you are to Uptown, but not there. And so you would obviously do that through all that stuff. And why not go all the way out to West Chase? Because you can do it on Richmond. Yes, ma'am.
So these rapid transit bus routes, they have a dedicated lane for the bus?
Yeah.
How do they work?
Okay, so it is critical that if they're going to work, that is to say not be stuck in traffic and going the same speed as a car, they have a dedicated lane, just like light rail does. So yes. So you have to get the cars out of that lane, and if you put bollards up or something, or you put nothing up, and that works too. So yes, you do have to have a dedicated lane. So if that dedicated lane, Richmond is a really interesting street, considering how far out it goes. Perfectly straight, pretty big all the way, no problem putting that in the middle of the street. And really, you know, you could do a cheesy job of it that was about painting the street. and don't do anything else. Use the buses we have, cut out 2/3 or 3/4 of the stops, and paint the street so the lane is dedicated. And if that's all the money you have, then you do that. Not the best way to start, but it would be a start. So it could be really cheap to start. So I think the most important thing our region can do is do that line, because you then wind up having 4 of the 5 biggest centers all connected, and it's dedicated, and so it's as fast as light rail. And of course, all the bus systems working across those things. Did something change just then?
Titles.
I don't know what that's for. So that's an urban system, something on the street. You could also do Westheimer, would be a great street to do exactly the same thing, because it's also incredibly long, goes way out there, and has plenty of room in it, except right in down, as you approach Main Street in Lower Westheimer, it gets pretty tight in there. But it's the right thing to do. Some people have a different idea that if you sort of did Westheimer, which is up here somewhere, and came to Wesleyan and then came down and connected this, you'd have it, which would not put it in the Montrose area, but as you can see, it's not really high density there. So going back to the concept of, at the regional basis, of where all these people are and where all these jobs are that everybody's always talking about, they're still inside the metro service area. These people and these jobs are not outside the service area. They just aren't. You could say we want it outside there, and we're going to have it because we demand it, but you can't justify it in terms of the number of people that are out there. And then again, the 10,000. So going back to, this is what we voted for in 2003. That system in there, which would tie together on Richmond and a little jogging and so forth, but tie together those 3 big centers, 4 big centers, and be wonderful. And that's still on the plan. If you ask Metro what we should do next as they're doing their regional plan, they will pretty quickly say, well, we already have this as the plan, as a plan, part of the plan. And people voted on it already, so theoretically we want to do that. I didn't mean to leave that on there, but let's just go back to this and say, when you say the best thing we could possibly do is do commuter rail, which is what the regional folks want, to Hempstead and places like that, you're talking about a kind of service that stops every 2 or 5 miles. So the 5 lines that people have proposed, none of them have stations inside the metro service area, except where they land somewhere downtown. It's very unclear how they would get to downtown, but except bringing people in, that's it. So in the morning you'd have a gigantic train that brings 1,000 people in pretty fast from Hempstead and places like that. If you were in, say, Paris or even Los Angeles, where there are cities outside there that could feed this kind of a thing, and then they keep using Hempstead. So my son, when he was working here, did a study on that and found that there are 81 people who come in and out of go to downtown Houston from Hempstead and Prairie View and those places every day. So you build a $2 billion commuter rail line for 81 people. And what they're forgetting is that all those commuter rail lines, or all those existing lines that are for freight rail now, all go into downtown Houston, because at the time they did that, there weren't any other places except downtown Houston. So everything comes in there. All the rail lines come to downtown Houston. They're all private. The railroads do not want to share them. They don't want to sell or lease right of way. They don't want passenger trains anywhere near their freight trains. And so they're fighting it hard, but that doesn't stop our county from trying to get it done. And all the time, we've just spent 60 years building this gray stuff, this incredible infrastructure that is how we get from home to work to school to store to whatever. This is how we connected the places together. This is why those places were built where they were built, because there's an intersection there of this highway system. And we own this, the public does. It's free. It's done. Some of it needs to be enlarged a little to accommodate better transit service, but that's ours now, and we in fact use it for transit. So if you put all that hotspot stuff in, you see that all these roads some road goes right through the middle of all of those things. And so why wouldn't you just use this infrastructure we have already that takes people exactly to where we want to go in all directions all the time? The blue lines are where we already have express bus service happening to downtown. These were parking ride services. The green line is one that's two-way. You know, it's out there I-10 where the buses can go 24 hours a day in lane, not their own lanes, but good enough, the HOV lanes. And eventually we need to see that this map is all green, that every one of these facilities has that. Now TxDOT is rebuilding 290 right now, specifically not putting two-way service in the middle of it. But why would they do that? They don't want people using transit. People who use transit tend to live in urban places, remember? So they're gonna, it's like, any of you know Robert Moses, the great developer and madman from New York City, who always made sure that whenever a new bridge was built, it was 6 inches shorter than a bus, so that a bus could not get through any of the bridges that they were going to build, so that people wouldn't use buses to go out to Long Island or someplace like that. You know, elected officials intentionally doing things to screw up your life because they think your life should be different than it is. So these are the park and ride stations we have now, and you can see most of them are in or at one of these dense places, these red places. And it should all be two-way, I think, and not a big deal to do that. Some of them are already big enough, we'll see that in a few minutes, to just repaint them so they're two-way. And then establish stations so that when you're on one of those park and ride buses, you're not only going to downtown, but you might have 3 stops along the way. And people will say, well, people don't like those stops because it makes the trip longer. Well, the bus that comes from Kingwood, way out at the end here on I-10 now, to downtown, gets there in 20 minutes. There's only one stop, and that's at the end. It's a 20-minute trip on most days. Of course, then it has to, well, that one, that's fine. Okay, so 20 minutes. A commuter rail line going out in that direction would have to make half a dozen stops to justify having it. And so that trip would be 45 minutes or an hour. And so you have to say, well, wait, what was the point? I thought we were going to get better service, not worse service. But if you get commuter rail and you get rid of the parking rides, you're going to have much worse service for the people who actually ride it. So, but we've got to stop along the way. So that 20-minute trip, unless there's an express bus, which you could do, that only goes from Kingwood to downtown, and then the next bus along stops at Energy Corridor and Memorial City and so forth, and then goes downtown or uptown. But we need to have stations at these places, so you can go to any of these big activity centers and little activity centers on a bus that's only going to make 3-4 stops tops, or you can pick them up, you know, get 2 of them inside. Going from the Energy Corridor to Memorial City is, you know, 5-10 minute ride, right? If everything's okay. So another big piece of all this right now is that we're always talking about the federal money that we need to do transit and all of our transportation. And when you go to meetings over at HJC, that's what they're focused on, federal money, which is like 10% of all the money we spend on transportation. You're about half for transit and about half for highways and so on. So I'm just saying, because of the way the government's been the last 10 years of getting worse all the time, we're not ever going to see any more transit money in Houston, period. I don't think. Now, it could happen in 10 or 15 years, but it's not going to happen anytime soon that we get any federal money. So we've got to figure out how to do this on our own. And we have figured out 90% of the problem already. Another thing I think we have to take off the table is light rail. This is what a light rail train looks like at a light rail station. And I just don't believe that we're going to build any more light rail in Houston. And I don't believe we need it. But the controversy, and it is ridiculous controversy, but it's there, is so fierce that I just think if we argue much longer for more light rail, which by the way costs 2 or 3 times as much as bus rapid transit, we won't get anything. So I'm saying let's get some service that's good service and get it fast. So this is what we'll be looking at. That's the same station, and that's a bus. That's not a light rail vehicle, it's got rubber tires. I don't know if you know that the whole Paris metro system, the underground in Paris, is all rubber tires. It's not there's no rail in Paris. So it's not like this is some cheesy idea, okay? It's a big time thing that Paris does. And people say it's like light rail on tires. So the vehicles tend to look a little bit like light rail vehicles, and they have the same kind of station, and they have the platform is up high, so you walk or roll into the door. You've already bought your ticket. There's multiple doors on the side. They all open, you walk in, they close, it goes. It's not there for 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So it's very fast and very efficient, and it can go just as fast as a light rail vehicle, obviously, if you don't have things in the way, which is the light rail vehicle has as well. So I'm not sure there's a downside, except if you let the streets get into bad condition. And if you think about having a bus like this, that's a pretty fancy bus going down Westheimer today in the right-hand lane, you know, it would be, I mean, the buses go to rack and ruin very fast. Janice, I'm sure, could tell you about that. I mean, they're scary, some of them. They rattle so loud and they shake and they're horrible to ride, some of them. And so there's lots of it around the world already running. This is in Nantes, France. This is how it works down the middle of the street, and they're fast, fairly fancy buses, actually. This is what it looks like in Medellin, Colombia, at the station. These people are catching buses here at this place. This is in Cleveland, and this is called the Health Line. And this is the first true bus rapid transit. I'm going to start saying BRT, okay? This is the first true BRT in America, in the United States. And it's done very well. It's been going now, I want to say 6 years, something like that. So it's very high ridership. And people like to say, well, you know, the developers won't develop along a bus rapid transit system. Well, this was 2 or 3 years ago. $5.5 billion in new investment at these stations coming as a result of that bus stopping at them and people getting used to the idea that that station is going to be there. It's not going to move next week. It's just as important as the light rail station would be. So it works to create development. And then just some examples. This is in Mexico City. Terrific neighborhood, wonderful the way. There's a picture up there of a don't ride a bike right next to the guy that's riding the bike. So things get a little complicated, but everything's going on in this picture. People walking, people shopping at restaurants, people getting on the bus, carrying 900,000 people a day. And all these other nice benefits. Car crashes go down by about 80% when you start doing BRT. Lots of air pollution goes down, particularly if you use electric buses, which is what's coming fast. Or in Rome, Istanbul, 750,000 people a day ride this thing. And here's one of the great advantages. This bus, when it gets to the end of its long dedicated lane, can just drive off into the center over here somewhere and make a couple of stops and drop people off and then drive back on. Light rail, you know, has to stay on the rail. So if there's no way, you have to have a shuttle or something from the station to take people to the place they're going. And then this is the pretty old drawing by now, who knows what it's going to look like, of what we'll do on Post Oak Boulevard. And
What's the status of that?
it's under construction, and if you go over there, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's under construction now, and it'll be a very good road bed. The only problem with it was that they had to keep the same number of car lanes. So they had to make it wider, you know, they had to take some land over here. Now, you know, on this side, if you think about it, there's nothing but parking lots, so there was nothing lost. And on the other side, all the buildings are set so far back, really nothing was lost over there either. You can't do that in a place like Westheimer where there's buildings right there. You know. But you could do it there. So this is going to be a huge experiment because it'll connect, it'll do a lot of things. It'll connect South Rice down in Bel Air. You'll be able to change to a bus, park and ride bus going out to Sugar Land, or up north at the North, is it the Northwest Transit Center? Is that, Janice, is that what's that up at I-10 and someone's...
Where TxDOT is doing all that work now, on 29 Northwest, they have expanded.
Yeah, okay.
Not enough parking.
But the point is it'll connect to I-10
Yes,
essentially.
they connect.
And so people coming in on those buses can get off at those two transit centers and then just take the BRT into town. Right.
Why did they have to add an extra lane for traffic? Was that part of the negotiation?
Yeah, you know, store owners, I mean, they are really sort of crazy people. Think about this. A store owner will say, you know, Kirby Drive has too much congestion. I want you to fix that by making the lanes wider so the cars can go faster. And then you just say to the store owner, well, but wait, are you sure you don't want the people stuck in traffic to be staring at your store for a couple of minutes? You want them to go fast so they don't even notice you? Well, they don't like to come here to this area because it's so crowded. Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? They're here for something. They're going to shop, you know. Or you can tell them, look, if you want really, really, really to have lots of people come into your store, let them walk in. Walk on the sidewalks. Because more people walk up and down Fifth Avenue every day than take buses or cars or anything. So, but you can't talk them into that sort of stuff. So they like the idea of everybody going real fast. And if you add lanes, then something called induced demand. People will quickly fill in all those spaces and it will be just as congested as it was, but there are now more cars. So this was a hard win. You know, people like Mattress Mac fought it tooth and nail right to the end. Because I think he's right in saying that nobody's going to come in the bus to pick up a mattress, but then they don't come in their cars to pick up a mattress either. So, but it's you know, I mentioned on purpose that I lived in Manhattan for 8 years. As soon as I got out of college, I went to Manhattan. And so all the things I see in Houston are just mind-boggling to me. This notion that, you know, a parking place in front of your apartment or house is your parking place is something that people would laugh at in New York. I mean, to the extent you can find a parking place, you can only leave your car there for 24 hours. You gotta move it across the street next 24 hours, and if you keep doing that, you know, I mean, it's like, no, those are the public's parking. So, you know, all these things that people don't understand because they've never lived in places like that. If people from here go to Paris, they don't make the connection that they're able to walk around and have so much fun because it was built for people walking around to have fun, whereas it wasn't built for people to drive cars around. So here is an example of a freeway sort of bus rapid transit in Istanbul. I think this one, 700,000 people a day ride these buses. And you can see that the facility, and by the way, there's 40 people in one of those buses, so I would guess probably one of these buses has as many people in it as all these cars in this. Maybe 2 buses. And that's always the case. If you want to learn something about freeway capacity, it's like bigger vehicles, not bigger roads. And this is the Southwest Freeway, where we have one bus only going one way. Changes at the end of the day to go the other way. And by the way, all the people in those cars, that's 40 people, and there's 40 people in this little bus too. So if we go back to this, oh wait, I didn't mean to do what I just did. So this is some extremely bad engineering kind of stuff I'm going to do right now. But that little red bar you see from the bollards to the bollards here in Istanbul, you take that, take these 2 pictures at the same scale, Southwest Freeway. Southwest Freeway has a little bit more room, according to these wonderful measurements, than the Istanbul does, but there's only one bus in it. So overnight, you could repaint this thing, and you'd have 2-way service in the Southwest Freeway if you didn't have TxDOT rules that say, no, we have to have 2 breakdown lanes for cars that are only going one way. That's their rules. Why do we have to do that? Because those are the rules. Why do we have those rules? Because they have that's how we have always done it, you know. Point being, we could restripe the Southwest Freeway and deliver BRT service there in the morning if we wanted to. And the buses themselves are getting pretty cool. I mean, these people, Proterra, are kind of the leaders right now. People are looking out to buy a lot of them. And by the way, a lot of cities are buying a lot of bus rapid transit vehicles right now because it's seen to be the thing that's going to happen, and we're going to need them in the 10,000 kind of range, you know, lots and lots of them. But this is an electric vehicle, battery operated, and charges at each end of the trip. And they last a lot longer because they're electric, so you know how that is if you've got an electric car. I have an 11-year-old Prius now, and when I took it in for a 100,000-mile checkup, I said, what do I need to do to keep this thing going another year? And the guy said, you know, nothing ever goes wrong with these cars, and I don't know why you couldn't keep it for 10 more years. I don't know why it wouldn't. Until recently, I heard about a Prius of my year that had gone 600,000 miles on the original battery. So we'll see where that all goes. But everything's moving to electric, and so these people are starting to make claims for selling them to everywhere. China, on the other hand, is buying fuel cell buses, so zero emissions, but fuel cell instead. And they just got this whole fleet of them. Everything they do 30, you know, or if we're going to try out maglev trains, you know, well, let's build 100 miles of it then or something. Let's build it everywhere. And then this is a disruption that's happening. So that's a Mercedes truck. You'll note the guy's looking at his iPad. He's not driving the truck. He's just in it, just in case. And while they test it to make sure nothing's going to go wrong, it's completely surrounded by Mercedes vehicles as he toodles on down the road. But that's actually happening now. Trucks with nobody driving them. This is the Mercedes bus. It still has a driver, but the driver's beside the point. And this is the first and easiest way we will see autonomous vehicles used is bus rapid transit, because we know what their lane is, we know where they're going to be, it's easy to keep them out of trouble. And we will see this happen, and it's already happened in some places where the smaller vehicles are going around. So driverless buses, electric buses, these kind of little vehicles. This is in San Sebastian in Spain. You know, as you can see, they have 8 or 10 people, something like that, but they can be just 20 feet apart. Now, they could be just inches apart, as a matter of fact, because one thing they cannot do is hit each other. And so it just comes along, and you've got your phone, and you go, stop for me, here's where I am. And it'll stop and get you and say, I want to go to here, and it'll just take you there. So we're going to see a lot of these little guys coming along. This is one, I don't know where this is happening. The Navia is, it's like a neighborhood, it's like an elevator in your neighborhood, that's going this way instead of this way. And it's easy to use, and just no driver, and I guess you pay with your phone. But this is all about telephones in just a second, I'll say. Or in the downtown area where they work like little shuttles and just go the same street all the time. Or this guy in Berlin. They're all over the world now, starting probably 75 or 100 of these things are actually in service in places. The first place I think we're going to see them is, I want to say Seattle. I think that's one. So one other thing then, before I leave the transit business is, this is the light rail system. These white spots are those. We have 39 light rail stations. And about 35,000 people live in those little glowing areas that are a quarter-mile radius around the station. And there's about 140,000 jobs you can get to on that line. So I think the big action is to focus policy on the idea of complete communities, where you can walk to everything. There's a store, there's a restaurant, there's a school, there's whatever, museums and all that. And what you can't walk to, you can get on a train and go to because it's somewhere on that line. There are thousands of amenities on this line, and universities and parks and everything under the sun. So we focus on pedestrians and bicyclists, handicapped people and transit users around those stations, and make the transit corridor ordinance that we have as an opt-in thing, make it a requirement that you have to build to certain kinds of code anywhere along this stuff, and we already have the legal right to do that. We just need a little more courage, and to start to really focus on these places getting big. This is Manhattan, so you can see Manhattan's a little bit bigger than the Loop. Then the Loop is long, so it'll fit inside the Loop 4 times, which is 8 million people if you did that. And we have about 600,000 people that live inside the Loop. So while we're not going to try to get 8 million people in here, there's no reason we can't get another million or something and be no sweat. It'd feel like Seattle or Washington. If we just added 10,000 people per square mile to each of these little circles, or on average to each of these little circles, because some of these places are not big. These places out here are not the same as downtown or the medical center. There's no skyscrapers out there, but there are 3 and 4 and 5 story buildings out there. We could easily put 600,000 more people in these places, and if we add 600,000 people to the city of Houston over the next 20 years, 15 years, where else should they be? I mean, shouldn't they, assuming that they want to be, shouldn't they be able to have transit available to them right outside the door? So, and by the way, that's what a neighborhood can look like in an urban place. And by the way, young people in particular love places like that. So then the big disruption that gets in the middle of all this stuff that almost nobody's talking about. This is a Tesla, and that's the whole chassis. I mean, that's it. They set the car up on top of these shock absorbers here and screw it down somehow. And that whole platform out there is full of little AA size batteries, a little bit bigger than AA size batteries, thousands and thousands of little batteries. An electric engine on each wheel, and that's it for a car. So this is a car that will last a long, long time and has no emissions and will be powered by sunlight. So that is a pile of internal combustion engines up there. We will not be able to buy a new internal combustion engine car, I would say, within 10 years. Now, you'll be a lot of used cars out there. And if you're thinking about buying a new car anytime soon, I wouldn't think about trying to resell it at some point, because you won't be able to unless you buy an electric car, because nobody in 10 years is going to want to buy a gasoline engine. So this is massively disruptive to everything you can imagine that has to do with the oil industry or with cities or with anything. Because along with that comes the idea that it's not just the vehicles, it's not just the cars, I mean, it's the trucks. This is the Tesla Semi, you know, the 18-wheel Tesla electric car, which Elon Musk, who runs the company, said he got to drive it around the parking lot. He said it handles like a sports car, that it's actually sort of fun to drive, I'm not sure. But electric, and at some point driverless. There's already a test vehicle out there that doesn't have a windshield, you know, a truck with no windshield, because why do you need a windshield? There's nobody in there. And so these three things, moving to electric, then the idea of shared fleets and driverless, all coming together at the same time, sort of in that order. Electric, you can already buy electric cars. Shared fleets, well, Uber's kind of like that, although they don't actually own any vehicles, but they're working on it, on owning a lot of vehicles. And companies like Hertz and Avis are thinking about how they have more experience maintaining thousands and thousands of cars than anybody else. So they've done a deal with a company called Waymo, which is Google's driverless car thing, where they're going to take care of all of whatever kind of cars Google can produce. They'll take care of. But don't you think sooner or later they're also going to be just having them available? If you're a corporation and you need a car this afternoon, and you got 50 of them sitting out in the parking lot that nobody ever uses because you just need one every now and then, you're just going to call Avis or Uber or somebody else. You're going to get on your phone and say, we need a car. And so this vehicle like here is, you know, we're going to see them all over the place. Little neighborhoods like in the Montrose, places like that. We won't see them out in the rural areas for a long time because of the driver issue. It's just not that easy to do. But we will see them in urban places pretty fast, and already see lots of them in some places. And it's sort of, I don't know how much stuff is going on in this picture, but it's running down a track, and it doesn't have to be. It just is using that right of way, and that's probably a light rail track in Europe somewhere. And it has a 10,000 pictures of somebody on a bicycle, and every one of them says, "Do not ever hit one of these." You know, it's got some, and you guys, some of you are software developers, so you know better than I. That's not exactly what's happening, but something like that. That little bus is saying, I can't hit somebody on a bicycle. It's like forbidden for me to do that, and I never will. Well, she knows that and doesn't care. Phew. Once we get that confidence that the vehicle won't hit us, everything's going to change. These will just be everywhere, helping us get around. So the takeaways from this that I'm trying to sell are that the regional transit plan, because both things are going on. Metro is doing what they call a long-range regional plan, but it's really just for their service area, and the HJC is doing an 8-county one at the same time. And the concept of both of those plans being data-driven, that is to say, if you can get more riders for less money by going here, then you would do that and try to ignore the politics. I think that's number one. The principle, if we could actually get to that, then everybody would ultimately be happy. But the top principle ought to be that we should serve the most people at the least cost, and not the other way around. And then finally, or not finally, but along the way, realizing that autonomous shared electric trip service is coming. There's 2 big studies out right now. One by, if you want to look it up, it's RethinkX. It's a .com, and it's a study of all this disruption having to do with electric autonomous shared vehicles. And it says that by, and I'm gonna forget this, but something like 2030, we will have 90% fewer cars on the road than we have today. Okay, 90% fewer cars. And have any of you seen the TxDOT plan for I-45? It's just,
Where they, don't go through, the city anymore, they go,
well, they don't go through the southern part, they go through the eastern part. So I don't know. Yeah, still, it's twice as wide as it is now. And if you're familiar with going to places out in Edo, they're all gone. They're going to be bulldozed for this thing. And it's for about the time they get it finished and in operation, there will be 90% fewer cars. There'll be no one to use it. And if you talk to some TxDOT folks, they don't know this is going on, what I just talked to you about. They do now, but they didn't know that. They were only thinking about opening land for development. And how can we get people who work downtown to have a faster trip out to Huntsville, where we're going to open land for development. Even if that's the case, even if that's your goal, you still don't need any more freeway lanes than we have right now, if in fact it's going to slowly diminish. And people won't own cars. Just the other part of it, that not only will you have a hard time selling your car, people aren't going to want to own cars when we get to the point where an electric car is 10 times cheaper to operate and doesn't have a driver to pay, and so it's approaching free to come pick you up and take you somewhere. I can, right now, all my uses of a car, I live in the city, so I don't have a long commute. But I do have a farm out in Austin County, so every Friday I go out 80 miles and 80 miles back. Okay, so I can take all my trips on Metrobus or Uber, except for the weekend, when I can rent a car every weekend for 3 days, and that will cost me $4,000 a year less than I pay to have the car that I have now. Why am I waiting? Why is anybody waiting? So, and then accept that light rail and commuter rail are off the table and make early commitments to dedicated transit rights of way. So we need those in the freeways. This is just decisions. We don't need any money to be spent. We need decisions to be made. We're going to have 2 lanes in every freeway, and we're going to have 2 lanes on major thoroughfares like Westheimer and Gessner and Richmond and wherever else, those Kirby maybe, you know, that kind of thing. Dedicate them so we know that people are going to develop accordingly. If we say there's going to be a station here and a station here and a station here on Westheimer, all the development will flock around that station. If it takes 20 years to actually get the transit in service, which it won't, but then we would be prepared for all of that. So I think that may be it. Yes, okay, so sorry to go on so long. Did I go on too long?
Great information.
So tell me what you think. Yes.
Well, I thought it was, thank you for coming out. It was very informative. Do you mind going back one slide so I can ask a clarifying question? I just want to make sure I understand the 7 areas that you said qualify.
Yeah.
So it looks like we got downtown, Med Center, this kind of 59 area.
I think if I go way back. So here's the Medical Center downtown, Greenway, Uptown, and West Chase, so the close-in ones.
Okay.
And then up at Greens Point, which is at Beltway and 45, out of the map. And then Memorial City here, and then out here is the energy corridor. Those all have massive energy hubs. And people, I mean, a lot more people live in Uptown than live in downtown. You know, downtown's got 3,000 or 4,000 people. You know, Uptown's got 60,000 people. So does West Chase. So they're already kind of, you know, they're like cities already. they just don't operate because everything is about moving cars through them.
That BRT or whatever it might be called, they're kind of by the Galleria area, as I understand it.
Right.
Is that in the middle or on the outside?
So it runs down the middle, and I think that's really the best. A lot of the stuff you see runs like our life. Well, no, not like our life, but sometimes they put them at the curb, and it's a big debate. For the user, you want it at the curb. You don't want to have to get out in the middle of the street, you know. And we'll see if we ever care what users care about. The transit companies like to consolidate it all, and this is our land in the middle of the street, not have two separate lands, you know. But I think it's starting to move around to the idea that they should be at the edges of the street. But then, of course, in a freeway, they'll be in the middle, so it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to get off and walk across the freeway.
Well, I'm curious to hear from the three of you that I know have worked on traffic projects. Like, what of this was new information for you? I mean, all of it was new to me, I feel like. What, for those of you more acquainted with the topic, what struck you?
So coming at this from, I guess, largely economics background, I think the idea that 90% of cars are going to be gone in the next decade strikes me as pretty optimistic, because as they do now, people are likely to be willing and able to pay a premium to get in a car that they don't have to share, doesn't have to make stops. And I think that the idea that we won't need extended transit for a rapidly growing city, because we're going to have buses that will inevitably be slower, seems
Slower
very
than what? Than a car?
Yeah, than
Bus
driving.
rapid transit is always faster than cars in traffic. Always. Has to be. I mean, it's not stopping at lights, it's not stopping for other cars, it just goes.
But in a world where we get driverless vehicles and that becomes no longer a concern, is that still an advantage to buses? Where there's no real risk of accidents, so traffic is lighter. There's no real concern about the flow of traffic because cars aren't going into each other and interchanges are likely to go smoothly, right?
But
So aren't a lot of the advantages of buses lost in that situation?
if you do a timeline, you can't really discuss it very well because nobody knows the answers to those questions. So if you say, I hope I didn't say a decade, more like 2 and 3 decades. And I think the number for the worst number, which was Pete Marwick, not Pete Marwick, what's the big accounting firm anyway?
Lloyd, seems like.
No, the other one with a P. There was at 99% of the cars are gone. It was, I think, 2030, might be 2040. So a little more than a decade, maybe 2. But if you're building things that take 12 or 15 years to build, you know, you got to consider that. Now, there are people who are writing out there that this whole idea of shared vehicles and driverless vehicles will just kill transit altogether. Because why do we need it at all? If the whole, because as you know, many of you who do apps and whatever, the world is based on your phone. I mean, your phone. You're not even going to have to think. You're going to say, I want to go to here and not think about how. And your phone will send to you the appropriate thing to take you there, you know. So what does that look like? Is that a bunch of little vehicles that's just for you? Probably so. Like Uber on steroids. Is it also something that on a street like Westheimer, where it just goes up and down the same street all day long, is much more efficient, and it's only got 8 or 10 people in it? Yeah, that's going to come, you know. Do we need buses that have 40 people? We need that first. We probably need that for 15 years. But then people can argue, after that, maybe we don't need it at all. Because the other thing that's happening when you start to focus in these places is people are walking places. I mean, you don't have to go very far. So when I lived in Manhattan, I had to go to my job, which was, like 5 subway stops away from me on an express bus, or I would go down to the village for fun or whatever. But really, groceries, whatever restaurants, it was all just right there. So the trick is, how can you get access to stuff without any kind of vehicle at all? And the best one I ever saw was in Atlanta, right across from the State House. There's a high-rise condo or apartment or something like that that has a Safeway grocery store in the bottom of it. And I went, and I didn't know that until the guy took me in and was telling me, this on top of this building there's 500 people live here, and at this moment somebody gets out of the line with their cart, having just paid, and goes over and gets in an elevator. And I went, oh, that's walkable. That's pretty convenient. So that's a little unusual, I guess, but we're getting to those things. We're really working on that in Houston. People are working hard on that. Yes.
So what I do is I look at data put out by the Houston Police Department, and I geocode it, and the part of the city that has the largest concentration of crime is, where all the lines come together.
Intersection.
It's like right around there.
Huh.
And see, when you're using public transit like what we're talking about, you're exposed. It's not like when you're in your car, and all the buttons are locked, and you have this powerful vehicle that can get away from a dangerous situation. So I'm just wondering what we need to do, or what we need to think about, so that people, they don't feel exposed. They don't. Do we need to have, extra policemen in the transit or at the stations? Do we need to have, ways to flag 911, and like, what about your emergency vehicles? How do they factor into all of this?
Okay, well, it's a bunch of things. So one is that generally it's thought, and your data is surprising, what you're saying to me, that crime rates are much lower in very urban places because there are so many eyes on the street, they say. And that most of the gangs and drugs and so forth are in the suburbs. So I am a little surprised by that, but the other part is, you're only safe in your car as long as you're in your car. Well, what do you have access to if you're in your car? Drive in something like food, because otherwise you can't get to anything until you get out of your car, and then you're exposed to the same problem as the person who just got off the train was exposed to. So a parking lot that's a block away from, I find nighttime parking lots really scary places. So I can't really answer the question because I don't know about the data. That surprises me. But I think, and then in terms of how emergency vehicles and all that, the streets are not going away. We're going to need them for all these little Uber vehicles, right? Or whatever. Will we have fewer cops? Generally speaking, the more dense a place is, the fewer police there are. It's cheaper to police those places because just less happens. So Los Angeles has fewer police than we do, although they have a lot more people. But that's just me making excuses for your problem. And I don't know how we ever get past people being afraid of things that are not irrational. The idea that it's dark out there and it's night, and Janice, you must do this all the time.
All the time.
So
It's actually greater in the broader daytime, because people are busy going to lunch, coming back from lunch, they're late, and they're not paying any attention to you at all, they step right over you, the crime's happening right there, but I don't have a fear, like you say, oh my God, oh, the boogeyman's gonna get me, because people have their cell phones too, recording everything. You're aware, you just have to be aware of your surroundings anywhere. When I was just in Denver, they got cops everywhere. I got checked 3 times on the train because I was in 3 different zones coming from the airport to downtown.
Make sure you paid for all those
And
zones.
they're armed too. They're not like fair inspectors here are not armed. You have Metro Police along with them, but people do have that fear of the boogeyman's gonna get them if you ride transit. And it's actually need to be more careful in your own building. Actually, you know, the people you work with, or you know, and so I don't have that fear attitude. Like, oh my God, because people think, you ride at night too? Yes, I do, bus or train, and there are undercover people on buses too, on the trains. You just don't know. I was on one just recently. You had no idea that was undercover cops. They looked like gangbangers, and someone was taken off the bus, and you just have to have an assertiveness appearance about you. Like, I'm not afraid, I will beat you with my cane. Okay, so you don't have that that sense, because it gives it off. If, you know, you have that fearful look, like, oh my God, if I say boom, you know. So just have that attitude. Just go with that attitude. Because I ride late at night too. And one time I was taking classes at night, and I just didn't have that fear because I'm always aware at all times of my surroundings. And if I see something, I pause and listening. It's not just seeing, but listening for your footsteps or something. Just turn around, look. Don't be afraid. Just turn around and look. If somebody is there, you look at them like, what the hell do you want? Okay, you follow me or what? And you have that sense of, I'll beat the crap out of you. And that'll get you over that sense of, oh my God. Because many people will say, oh, you ride the bus at night, you ride the train at night after dark. Yes. And there are cameras everywhere on the train. Now, in fact, you can use your phone to text the police. You don't have to call. There's an app on there, and just like people are on their Facebook and whatnot, you can be texting MPD, a live chat, and you can be anonymous if you want. I usually let them know who I am, and tell them, and you can send a picture too, very discreetly, and let them know where you are exactly, and they said, I'll send a unit. So that's another new thing that if you're in a situation where I'm doing something to somebody, you can send it to the police right away. Tell them what train number, where are you, what station. You send it, send. So people love that. That's something new. It's on the app. You can text them without exposing yourself that you're calling the police, because you don't know if I'm with the people causing the trouble or what. So you don't have to feel endangered by calling and somebody might hear you or something. It's text.
I'm a little surprised that there's not a panic button on these phones, you know? And all have this, I don't know what it would be, just hold down the home button or hold down something, and that means calling the police, and it knows exactly where you are, and you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised we haven't got to that yet, but
I think they're working on that.
have to be.
And going back to the fear of being on a train and just being exposed, I think a lot of it, as somebody who rode the light rail on a regular basis for a couple of years, is just getting used to it, right?
Yeah.
It's scary the first couple of times because it's something new, and again, as a Clear Lake suburbanite, I always heard only bad people ride the train or whatever, right? But you ride it a couple times and you see that's not true, right? And eventually the fear just kind of subsides.
Yeah, it's funny, the people that are that I see on the train that at first are the most disconcerting, I guess, is would be totally incapable of getting up and hurting me. You know, I mean, they're just people who are on their last legs in a way, and they're just riding the train around. I don't know, I just don't see that, so. But one thing this brings out, of course, is that, and I'm just gonna say half, because I don't have any idea what these numbers are, but half the people love to be around lots of other people, and half the people don't. And so people that say, you know, I wouldn't live in Houston, I wouldn't live in New York, I wouldn't live in any place where there's too many people and they all live like rats and blah, 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 you know. I want to live out here where I'm all by myself. And I can punch a button in my car and the garage door will open and I don't have to see anybody, you know. And to say one or the other of those is wrong would be missing the point. You know, people are just the way they are. We have had this kind of fight as if we're headed for having only one solution. And that's not what we're trying to do, you know. If you wanna live apart from other people, that's your right, you know. Now, we shouldn't have to subsidize that the way we do now. I mean, they couldn't build houses for $250,000 out in the Katy Prairie if somebody didn't put $1 billion road in there for free, you know. So, or you know, if we didn't, you have a situation right here where somebody lives in an apartment in Houston, has 800 feet of wire or something that's about them, and somebody lives out in the suburbs, has thousands of feet of wire that's about them, but we both pay the same rate for the electricity, or for the water, or the pipe, or the whatever, but much more expensive to deliver those services out where it's far from the plant, where everything's big and long and whatever the thing is. So, and you have to build special $1 billion roads so developers will do it.
Yeah, there are jobs, you know, out on the ship channel, out, you know, at NASA, out. So, you know.
But you saw they don't even show up
Right.
as serious numbers of jobs.
Right.
You know, 50,000 jobs on some number of acres is a lot, but it's nothing compared to these other places.
Somebody who lives out in really, it's basically NASA in the high schools, and then everybody else kind of, if you work out there, you work in Pasadena.
Right. Yeah. Or the ship channel somewhere, yeah.
Right. Somewhere that's not technically Clear Lake. Ellington too.
The Greater Houston Partnership they had McKinsey do a study for them about 4 or 5 years ago because they wanted to really understand how our economy works. And they were thinking the most valuable things we have here are the Texas Medical Center and NASA. What's the other big thing we think we have? Anyway, when they did the numbers, those places didn't even show up. Oh, the ship channel, yeah. As part of what goes on, say, at the energy corridor, where people are writing checks for billions of dollars to make things happen all over the world, and you know, and that's where the action is, and that's where the economy is, in all these places where there are big office buildings. All the other stuff is peanuts compared to the amount of economic action that happens in these centers. And so it means they've changed the way they are going to look at the future, you know. I mean, medical center, how can there be, the medical center is totally dependent on people being sick, right? And so, and they want them, I don't say the people in the medical center, doctors want people to continue to be sick, but it's in the back of their minds that what if everybody was well? What would we do? So you can't, you know, Houston Tomorrow tried to get some money from a foundation about 10 years ago, and we started talking about health and the built environment. There's a big case about how that works. And they said, well, we do health care. And I said, well, but what if you actually made the neighborhoods healthier and people weren't sick, and then you wouldn't have to do health care? And the answer was, David, that's a huge part of our economy. Sick people? And we like this? We think this is a good thing and we're going to support it? But not health itself. You know, so it's a hard world. So that it?
I have one question. I guess my question is, how will the people know about this stuff? 'Cause, like, for example, for me, it wasn't until I went to this meeting that, and I feel like that's a place where like work could be done. As in, like, I don't know, maybe like having a type of application or something that like lets the people that are actually in the city, in the urban areas, like, I don't know, pinpoint like suggestions, or I guess a way to represent like to the big people that, like, you know, there is people that are interested in getting all of this infrastructure built, and not, because I mean, like, just right here right now it's only what 8-10 of us, and like where there could be, and you know, there's a lot more people that are interested in using, like, now that I saw it, I also want to be part of it, but I didn't know of it until like this meeting. But I feel like that's also
Well, so the important thing is that Metro is now working on their long-range plan, and they are eagerly seeking people's opinions and ideas. You can go online, I've forgotten now, what's that, do you remember the name of the website?
Metro Next.
Metronext.com, I guess. Might be .org, but just Metronext, one word,
Metro
dot
Next.
something. And there's a survey there, and you can make some comments that are just whatever off the wall comments. Or, are there any more events, or are those all over? There'll be some more.
The first set are over,
Yeah.
but there'll be more
Yeah.
as they get more information in, and then break it down.
So you can go to these meetings, and they will be all over the region, so you should be able to find one that's close. And there's the people they have these stations based on certain maps and things that are up on the wall, and so you can go and ask questions, and you can go and just tell them exactly what you think for a long time, and they're happy to hear it, because most people would rather stay home and wonder why they don't get it right, without having to, as Janice said, you know, you gotta be at the table. You know, you gotta come in and say, and one thing to keep really tight in mind is that the bad guys always go to these meetings. They always express their opinions, and they do it loud, and they do it at the Metro board meetings. You know, any of you, not Janice, of course, but have ever been to a Metro board meeting? I bet, you know, once a month you can go there and just speak. And
You can watch them after the fact too. They're archived back to 2010.
yeah, you can watch the video. Well, you can see it live, right?
I like to be there live. You don't make comments at the committee meetings. You can sign up to speak at, say, the board meeting is Thursday, and you can sign up, it's Tuesday now, but like, you sign up ahead of time on what your topic is. And you have 3 minutes, and those are very interesting. Because they're getting ready to approve the next year's budget, also, the next budget, fiscal budget. And they're always at the Metro headquarters on the 2nd floor boardroom. You go through a scanner, like security at the airport or something, and have a seat. And you can listen if you want. You don't have to speak. You just listen.
It's pretty interesting.
It's very interesting.
There are people who show up, regulars who show up every meeting with some complaint that they've been doing for 17 years, you know, or whatever. And others that are just there because one thing happened to them was really bad, and they're just citizens, and they're upset, and they just want to say, you know, why did this happen to me? They're serious, you know, where you can really go tell them what you think, and you're talking to the people who make the decisions.
Well, it's fortuitous that you mentioned that site, because when you pulled it up, it says that the survey closes on Friday, whatever they're doing right now.
Better
so-
get in there and do it real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, Friday, September 29th. Yeah, well, okay, we'll get in there and do it. I can tell you 2 of the choices.
Again, that's
More trains.
metronext.org.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anything that talks about having more trains or more buses or more service, say yes on that. Put your money on those things.
You showed your original map, and then your different layers that you created. Is the original map data accessible to the public?
Yeah. So, if you have any experience doing that kind of stuff, you won't have the problems I have. But I don't know how to tell you how to get to the ACE map. But I think if you go to HJC and then in the little search box just put ACE, it'll take you to that map.
You have to remember when you're putting in the web address that it's H-GAC.
Oh, okay.
Because it's Houston dash Galveston area codes.
Right.
It'd be much easier to not have to do that, but I don't understand why.
I know Judith mentioned crime data, I guess. Is there any other type of data that you think would be interesting to overlay with this that you work with?
Yeah, so, you know, what we want to have happen is for our cities to be places where children can live. So the city of Vancouver, back in 1970-something, the city council passed an ordinance that said anything that has to do with development that we're going to pass on has to begin by answering the question, is this good for children? So everything they do in Vancouver has to answer that question. Is this good for children? And as a result, there are thousands of children that live in downtown Vancouver because it's got parks and everything. You know, it's a great place. So to think about children, schools in particular, you know, a school ought to be a safe place. You shouldn't be able to see car wrecks happening near schools. And you shouldn't have to kids, I mean, you know, where did we hear about there was, it wasn't in Houston, but there was somewhere a woman was arrested for making her child walk to school. You know, as if that was some kind of traitorous action. So these attitudes about cars they're insane, you know, that if you don't go to school in a car, you just don't have a chance in the world in life, you know. So people come up with these great things about walking buses. Have you seen this idea where a mother will take her child and walk along and pick up half a dozen, 10 other kids, and they all walk together in the form of a bus down the sidewalk. So they're all together and they're all safe and they've got one adult. Oh my God. Yes, it's late, folks. Are you kidding me? How long did I talk?
Well, we had good discussion afterwards.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
You don't want me to just pull this out of here, do you?